on with his life. So Liz. It's 7:30. All right. Nice to have you. I'm good. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the November 7th, 2022 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Stephen Spur and I am chairman of the Summit Zoning Board. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and also broadcast on Summit's government channel, which is Comcast channel 34 and Verizon channel 30. Please note that fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter. This evening, Mr. Dennis Galvin will be acting as the zoning board's attorney. He will advise board members on matters of law and is the key interface with an applicant's attorney. Mr. Galvin does not vote on the applications. Stephanie Sulios is a city employee and the zoning board secretary. Ms. Sulios assists applicants with the preparation of their applications, planning our agenda, and keeping our meeting minutes. Stephanie does not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Some applications require 5 affirmative votes to be approved. You'll be told which majority will be required before we begin our deliberations. Ms. Sulis, will you call the roll of the members?
Sure. Chairman Spur?
Here.
Vice Chairman Steiner?
Here.
Ms. Newell? Here. Mr. Yuko?
Here.
Mr. Mullen?
Here.
Mr. Millay?
Here.
Mr. Loikitz is excused this evening. Ms. Toth?
Here.
Ms. Sager? Here. Mr. Gonzalez?
Here.
You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thank you.
We left out Mr. Mullins.
No,
Oh, I missed it. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
You're way off on the edge of the dais, I know, right? That's okay. We'll get you a little closer next time. We generally hear the applications in the order they are listed on the agenda. We try to have each hearing last no more than 30 minutes, but we do understand that some applications are too complex to be heard within that time frame. Each hearing begins with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the variances that are required. We then hear from any expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain their application and why the variances are needed. The board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and the expert witnesses. Once the board professionals and board members have completed the questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about this application. That opportunity comes at the end of the hearing. Before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It is important that our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record. The court reporting is conducted over the microphone system and the video, so make sure to speak clearly into the microphone. After all witnesses have been heard, members of the interested public have a second opportunity to speak, and at that time may express their opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed, and we enter into executive session where board members discuss the application and vote. We will be able to listen to our executive session, but you will not normally be able to participate in the discussion. Most applications are heard and decided the same evening, and if an application requires additional information or testimony that cannot be presented tonight, we will carry your application to another date, and it will not be decided during this meeting. Krista Anderson, the city zoning officer, has asked that I remind all applicants that they must carefully read the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and to pay particular attention to the conditions contained in the resolution. For example, if a landscaping plan is required, you must obtain one and submit it to John Linson, the city's forester. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering division. Failure to satisfy the necessary conditions in a resolution will result in a delay in approving your application, as it will necessitate additional follow-up from zoning and other city staff. The resolutions documenting the board decision will normally be available 1 month after we decide the application. When I call your name, please tell me how many witnesses you have, or whether you think you can complete your application in 30 minutes. First on the agenda will be Charles and Jennifer Salzman, 6 Essex Road. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Britt Long of Dempsey and Sheehan, appearing on behalf of Charles and Jennifer Salzman of 6 Essex Road. And we're here this evening seeking variance approval for their property.
Sorry, we're just going to run quickly through the agenda, so I just want to know how many witnesses you have, and what do you think 30 minutes is
I have
practical?
2 witnesses maximum,
Okay.
and yes, we can certainly get through this in 30 minutes.
Okay, and your witnesses are?
Mr. Salzman
Mr.
and Mr.
Clark?
Clark.
Okay,
Yes.
excellent. All right, excellent. Just going to run quickly through the agenda, then you're first up, so
Okay.
don't
By the way,
worry.
I don't think we can work the exhibits in a half hour.
I feel bad for Stephanie's desk at the end of this, but yes, that's right. All right, next on the agenda will be Monisha and Wayne Lewis, 18 Pine Ridge Drive. Just come up real quick. Thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Lewis, any witnesses with you this evening?
No witnesses.
Okay,
And yes, we'll be done in 30 minutes.
cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll take the 29 Plymouth Road due to a conflict involved here. This was an application that we were expecting to hear tonight on a final hearing or, and vote. However, staff, Krista Anderson and Stephanie have really worked hard to work with the applicant and their representatives. And we're pleased to report that the application has been revised to remove the application for the addition, but to revise it to handle some of the issues that were of concern to the city. And they have filed a new application, a revised application, which we are asking the board to accept and as complete according to Krista, and if we can then reschedule it for hearing, I believe on January the 4th is the date we're looking at, if the board is so amenable, and we would look for a motion to move that.
I'm okay with that as long as they're going to renotice the neighbors, because I think
Yes, this is
fourth-
requiring complete re-notification. It's being handled almost as if it were a new application, except for the fact I think the fee's half because it's a revised application.
Because I keep scratching off dates here. This will be the 5th date they're scheduled for.
We're totally, and what's in there, they're not going to be doing. They're going to be handling the issues that we came up with during the hearing.
Okay, and then I guess, at the last time this was delayed to tonight, it was, we would hear it or deny it, and the fact that this has been totally revised
That's
makes
correct.
that binary choice no longer applicable.
I can't tell you what will happen on January 4th, but the hope is that we can move it through and complete the application.
I'm just curious, how, like, if someone were to file a new application right now, when would they get a hearing?
Well, let me change the focus on this. If someone filed a new application now, we wouldn't be hearing them for 6 months. Okay, there's 45 days to be deemed complete. If you're deemed complete, which normally doesn't happen in a month and a half, then we have 4 months to hear them. So we'd be looking at like 5.5 months. The difference between this case and that scenario is that there's something illegal going on this site that we want to have corrected. And so we're pressing them to get in here so that we can bring them into conformance. Or we deny them and then Krista can pursue them. Under the land use law, once somebody files an application, they get a stay and they don't have to do anything. So, and where they came in wanting one thing and discovered that they had all these.
Right.
As I get it, so what I'm saying is, everybody's right. The concern that they've been putting you off is right. And if they were being recalcitrant and holding very tight, we would have dismissed them tonight. But they've made a sea change to what their plan was. They're taking the right steps to be conforming, so we want to give them a chance to present. I don't know why it's going into January, but, you know.
Calendar.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I was just thinking about, in fairness, we've been,
No.
people have been coming in and we've
Yeah.
been given dates that are
Yeah,
fairly far out.
but I'm
and they've
saying
been
we have
trying
a,
to-
we have a different philosophy. When you're a
Right.
developer trying to create something and you're playing fast and loose with us, we don't really want to rush you along or give you a new means of cheating access. But when you're not, and every once in a while we get a case where they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and we need to get them in front of the tribunal as fast as we can. That's this case, and they've done everything they can to delay up until now, but they've finally seen the light, so we got to move the ball.
So again, we would accept a motion to move this to January the 4th. With
So moved.
notice. And we have received from them all the appropriate certifications as far as time to act, et cetera.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Final check-in before we begin will be New England Avenue, NE Summit Associates, 79-105 New England Avenue. Do we have counsel?
We do, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Larry Kelly, on behalf of the applicant, we're here and ready to proceed this evening.
Excellent. How many witnesses do you have?
Three.
Three. And what do you think, 30 minutes is realistic?
If I had it my way, absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
You're running the show, so okay, no, we'll work on it
We'll
together.
try to
Thank
keep it at
you.
30,
That
Mr.
sounds
Chair.
like an hour or two.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a planner for that case?
We have a planner.
Good.
Okay. Before we proceed with 6 Essex Road, if you'll join me for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now we can play ball. First up, 6 Essex Road.
World Series.
Yeah, squeeze a little extra.
I'm still Britt Long for Dempsey and Sheehan.
Welcome back.
And thank you. And I'm here on behalf of Charles and Jennifer Salzman for 6 Essex Road, seeking bulk variance approval for their property. They're fairly minimal setback variances, and there is a slightly larger patio variance. And I would like to call as my first witness, Mr. Clark. Shall I go through his credentials, or will the board accept his credentials?
We will accept. Welcome back, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Clark, what can
Do
you
you
tell
swear
us?
affirm the testimony about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your full name for the record, spell your last name.
Andrew Clark, C-L-A-R-K-E.
All right. And so, why are we here?
All right, so this application involves a previous application that came in front of the zoning board in 2016. It was approved, and just to give you guys a picture in case you're not aware of, how this normally goes once it leaves here. Normally what takes place once a variance is granted, the necessary work is done to get the plans into permit shape. They're submitted for a permit, and then work continues. Ordinarily, an as-built survey is not required in Summit most of the time, unless upon a final inspection they see something that's substantially different than what the plans that were approved show, and then they call for an as-built and evaluate it to find out if there are any issues zoning-wise or otherwise that result from that. That did happen in this case. An as-built was called for, and then after further review, it was discovered that there were a number of differences, several differences between what was built and what was approved by the zoning board application. So what occurred in that time frame, so the board hearing happened, an approval was granted, and then several months later, permit plans were submitted. At the time, I'm normally pretty attuned to any changes that take place, and I try to guide applicants if they've moved away from or past whatever their approval was granted before it even gets in for the permit. That didn't exactly happen in this case. I missed some of the differences that were significant enough to warrant some discussion. It also was apparently missed on the permit review. So even when I sometimes miss something, normally then, once it gets to the official review for the permit, either Krista or someone from engineering will reach out and say, hey, there's something, you know, not matching up here with this condition that was placed in the resolution. Can you look at that and see if you can correct that, and, you know, let's get this so it matches up with the approval. And so that didn't happen in the sense that the revised plans went in, the architectural plans and my grading plan that was revised, that had some differences from the resolution, but a permit was issued. Work occurred, so some of those things that were on their face for the permit review were built. And then in addition to that, there were some patio changes that occurred that were also beyond what the original approval had. So that's just sort of the summary of why we're here. Now I can tell you briefly what the differences are. So Krista's memo that she issued on November 1st outlines the variances that were granted. Those variances were primarily, in this first plan that I have, is what was submitted and labeled as the original application plan.
Mr. Clark, sorry, just as a
Sure,
matter of process,
sure.
are any of these, before we get to the photographs, any of these items you're about to show us vary from what the board has
No.
already on record? Okay,
No.
thank you. Please proceed.
The only one is the as-built is bigger
Okay, fair enough.
than what you have, but it's the same product. So what was originally submitted is on this original application plan. And there was a small addition in the back, another small addition with a porch behind it, and then there was going to be a porch with underneath with a terrace off of I think the master suite on the second floor. So it was going to be an open porch area, and it was, you know, it had some chamfering on the corner. That was the original application. The existing patio was going to be maintained. The existing patio was encroaching into the rear yard. You're allowed to encroach 10 feet into the required rear yard with a patio. This was a bit more than that, so the setback should have been 35 feet, 24 I think was the existing patio, so that was also granted as an existing non-conforming condition that they wanted to continue. The other variances were all for setback in here. Setback to the porch addition of 34, 40 feet for the actual enclosed addition, 37 feet to the porch itself in this location in the back right. So those were the variances that were granted, where 45 is required. Fundamentally at that hearing, what the basic premise is that this house is positioned so far back on the lot, I'm sure in part because of the steep slope, and also I'm sure it probably tracks back to just a time thing, like when the house was built, it was more of an impressive presentation to have it back there. But nonetheless, the house is situated back far enough that anything you do in the back, most of it was already either at the limit or over the limit. So that was what drove the variances, and that was the fundamental argument, was the hardship of the existence of the house being where it is. So fast forward after the approval and the permit plans were submitted, and by cursory examination, it's basically the same. However, this porch that was proposed that had the chamfers on it, which you've got your 34-foot setback, was squared off in this plan, in the permit plan. And this was enlarged, the addition on the back right was enlarged a little bit. So what results is some changes to the setbacks that were closer than what had been approved. So we had 34 feet on the porch, 33.3 feet is what was proposed on the permit plans. And so there were some differences between that and the permit plan. This probably should have been shut down in the first place and not issued a permit. It didn't. So it went forward, the construction happened, and we got to the point where an as-built was called for. I believe the as-built was called for because when the engineering inspector came out to review, he said, wait, this patio doesn't look the same as the patio before. do an as-built. So we did the as-built, which then uncovered these other setback issues that had resulted. I did my best in the chart here to summarize what the resolution called for, and I labeled them that way in the as-built, and what actually resulted in the as-built. So you can see what the differences are, but, you know, 34 feet for the first one, 34 feet was approved, 33.3 was on the permit plan, and that's what ended up in the as-built, 33. The other change for the as-built in this portion here where the porch was, is that the second story is fully enclosed now. So it's now solid on the second story, and there's a porch under where it was open on that level before. Then the second setback was approved at 40.3, which is this little addition that was added in here. It was approved at 40.3, 40.2 was on the permit plan, 40.0 is what resulted in the as-built. The third one is 2C, which is over here on the far right corner. That was approved at 43.75, 43.6 was on the permit plan, 43.3 is what was resulting in the as-built. And then the last one is where the porch is, right here, that 2D condition. 37 was approved, 36.9 was on the permit plans, and 36.7 was as-built. So you can see from these differences in the dimensions, they're relatively minor. The worst one, I think, is 8 inches in terms of the actual porch right here, which is the enclosed second story. So it's about 8 inches in the difference between what was approved and what resulted in the field. The most significant, dimensionally significant part of it is the patio. So it was intended, there was an existing patio to the left and the patio that wrapped around the back. It was the intention of at the time of the approval to maintain that. And the change that happened was this entire patio was eliminated. There's just a connecting walk now. And then this patio was extended farther into the yard. So where it was 24 feet in the back corner, it's now 13 feet. So those are the main differences between what was approved and where we are now and why we're here.
Now, you have the neighbors here tonight from the property behind you.
That's correct.
Okay, so.
Right.
Could you, let's do something weird. Sure. Could you come on up? Is that okay? Please. Come on up. Because the number one concern the board's gonna have, and I don't want to speak for the board, is what's the impact? Sure. All right? Raise your right hand, sir. This one? That's the right one. There you go. Do you swear or affirm testimony about the giving this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, give us your full name
Raymond Merritt at 61 Hobart Avenue.
and spell your last name.
Merritt.
So tell us what you think about this.
Oh, I've
So you're at this lot right here?
directly behind.
Okay.
Right, so I've lived in the house about 6 years. I know the Salzmans very well. When I purchased the house, I was delighted to know that they were my rear yard neighbors. I've been in front of the zoning board because I had to ask Chuck to actually be here for me because I put a garage. We tore down a garage at my property and moved it to the back corner of my property because I had.
This area?
Exactly, because my garage was a weird garage angled sideways. I have a shared driveway. In my house at 61 Hobart, the architects and designers decided to put it compliant with all the other garages in the back of Hobart, which are in the back corners. So when the architects and the planning zone looked at this, we came with the architects and the planning board said, yes, that's a much nicer way to put it in the corner. So I asked the Salzmans before I did anything, if it would be nice if I could put my garage in the back corner. He said, of course, because I'm doing work.
And it blocks your view of their house.
Well, it's kind of off to the corner, but when I did that, Chuck explained to me that he's going to do a lot of landscaping and work and putting a retaining wall, and we share the same landscaper. So I asked my landscaper, what can we do so that I don't have to look at Chuck's house and he doesn't have to look at my garage? So we all came up with the idea that shrubbery, plantings, what's the fence, a lattice work fence with ivy. I didn't want him to have to look at my garage, and he didn't want me to have to look at his house and patio, although we're very good friends and neighbors. And it was a phenomenal job that they've done to block out any screening. We barely see the house. I mean, we have a big row of, plantings and Chuck put, the Salzman put beautiful, plantings and trees all across the back. I barely see the house. So I think they've done a wonderful job at all the construction.
Now, are you a paid actor?
Yes, I'm a paid actor, and I get paid, they own a beverage distributor, so we get a lot of
There you go.
beverages. But no, we're very pleased with everything they've done. I think they've been happy with everything we've done. We've done a lot of landscaping together. We put a lot of shrubbery in, and I couldn't think of anything. Everything they've done is absolutely beautifying that property. I mean, everything they've done is beautiful. We have no issues with there's no light pollution. We don't see anything through the hedges and the fences. And, I couldn't imagine that anything's wrong with what they're, again, not the number of inches they've come back or anything. I've been to their house scores and scores of time for social events. Everything they've done is beautiful. So my wife and I are fully in favor of what they've been doing to the house, and it's, I think everything that they've done is wonderful.
Thank you so much. We really
Okay.
appreciate it.
Happy to support them.
You're a good neighbor.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Not for
take it
this,
from here.
but not for this witness, but.
So just to clarify.
Mr. Clark, this gentleman would not be the person referred to in Ms. Anderson's comment at the bottom of page 1 relative to the issues to the left with the closed porch. He would not be the same person, would he?
Bottom of the first page.
Left side and rear potentially different impact on the rear neighbor from previously approved open porch.
Yeah, I think.
Is that the same witness or not?
I think what she's pointing out is this rear left here.
Right, but it's not the same property.
Well, no, I don't know if she's even citing a specific property.
Well,
other
she's
than to say
citing,
that
she's
there's-
citing specific, what did she say? Windows on the left side and rear may constitute a potentially different impact on the rear neighbor from the previously approved open porch. So I'm trying to make sure, is
Likely
this
in.
the same person?
Yes.
Because,
Well,
or
it-
not,
it
because
would-
there
it
are
would
3
be
other
him-
properties there.
It would be him or this other neighbor would be the only two that.
And
that would
Mr.
be
Clark, in terms of
candidates.
impact, that's lights likely we're talking about? Are there
So-
floodlights or something that were erected on that corner?
So I think the suggestion is, and the thinking is that open porch that was
Right.
planned for this area is now enclosed, so there's some windows there instead of an open,
Right.
an open porch area. And I think she's raising the question of whether or not that may potentially have a different effect on the neighbor to the rear.
But from what you know of this now enclosed structure, is it casting some new shadow or
No.
some
No,
new
because
light
these-
flooding across?
These properties are sitting up from this property. There's like a 3.5 foot wall and then another 4 or 5 foot wall in the back. So they're up 6 or 7 feet.
All right.
So no.
And from your knowledge of the property, the screening that was put in place would likely address any potential
Correct.
negative
This
impact?
entire area is now full of evergreen screening
Okay.
that's in place.
Okay.
And it's, at this point, fairly well developed.
Okay.
Maybe when it was
Excellent.
first planted, it was a little bit lower, but
All right. I think we're
it's
going to
pretty well
introduce
developed.
one photograph, and we're going to mark this as Exhibit A1.
See, now maybe we're not gonna mark this.
No?
Let's take a look.
Okay, all right.
Because or else I'm going to burden our secretary. All right?
Where you store it.
room that is newly enclosed and the walkway.
Okay.
It has double shades,
We're good. We're good.
light.
Okay. Those look like blackout shades. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
So yeah, fundamentally, in my opinion, the differences in the setbacks and the enclosure of the second story
Right.
should not have any adverse effect beyond what the original application considered.
Okay.
If anything, maybe the enclosure of that space is different use than a porch. So,
All right, we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
If we go off the rails, I'll get you back engaged, okay?
I'm ready.
Tom, did that answer your questions?
No, not really. I can accept that some of this stuff was, minor things that happened in the field, but that area which I think you labeled stone patio,
Right,
if I'm reading the numbers right, that's actually an 11-foot difference from what was approved?
that's right.
So that's a pretty significant difference. And
It is.
how did that happen without knowing they were in violation of what the resolution was?
That I can't say for sure, because I don't often spend a lot of time on the site during construction in a project like this, because it's not a new house. So on a new house, I might be out doing stakeout and some other supporting services where I might have noticed it or said something. In this case, I was not on site for a long time and then came back to do the as-built. So I don't know the exact progression of how it ended up in that arrangement. What I can say from being on a lot of construction sites is very often the subcontractors who do this work are not tuned into zoning issues. For most of them, what they're looking at, if there's a change in the patio, in this case, we'll take out this one and expand this one. What they're thinking about is the square footage and the coverage.
But aren't they in tune with the plans? I mean, that stone patio was not approved.
Well, they are. But what I'm saying, and based on my 20-plus years experience, is that field changes happen, and so things get built that are a bit different than the plan. And a lot of times, that process ends up as an evaluation on the fly. Now, I don't know exactly how this played out, but I'm relating it to many other conditions that I've seen. So they'll say, hey, we want a different shaped patio that's expanded over here. Is that a problem? And then their question is, well, are we going to go over on coverage? Have we exceeded our coverage? And it's usually, well, if we take this out and put that in, then we should be fine on coverage. I'm just suggesting that maybe the forces on the ground may not have realized the setback issues that were in play with the patio.
So I'd like to ask the applicant's attorney, do you think the applicant himself could shed any light on how that patio got
Yes.
there?
Yes, he
Okay.
intends to do so, and
Well,
he
let's
is,
do
deeply
that now.
Let's bring 'em up. I want to understand the timeline of events. So when was construction commenced and completed on this?
Sorry,
I don't know. I know
raise
the
your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I think Mr. Salzman has to answer the timeline and the patio question, because
Yeah.
Mr. Clark did build it.
Yes, I believe it was in 2016, it was the time of the construction. It was a site change, we were under construction. The way that the house changed in the back of the house, the kitchen used to come right out to the patio. That changed a little bit where we got rid of the back door off the kitchen. There was a mudroom put on and another kitchen door sort of on the other side. So the way the patio existed didn't really make sense the way we saw it for the house as we were going to use it moving forward. And this was, again, a site change. I was talking to the contractor, not doing the work, the landscaper on the property, and we said, hey, we have this whole side patio. It's very large that really we don't have access to the way the house is. We're using the back of the house anymore. Could we pull that out and make the back patio larger? He agreed. He thought it was a good idea, and we did it. I did not understand that we would need, anything different for that, or a variance, or anything. It wasn't discussed. Yes.
Did that landscaping professional suggest to you in any way that you needed any kind of approval for anything you were doing with the patio?
No.
Okay, thank you. Would you have gotten the approval had you understood that you were advancing further into the setback, and that was in fact the reason you come before this board the first time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you attend your hearing in 2016?
I was about to ask.
I did not speak. I was in the room at the hearing.
Did you read the resolution approving your variance?
I didn't in the detail that I should have, and I apologize for that. I will say I've lived in the house for 13 years. I've done construction on 95% of the interior and the exterior landscape. I have never had a problem in front of the board or the town on any of this. This is the first time. I bring it up just to show a track record of this is not a pattern of something that I'm proud of, and I apologize for taking everyone's time this evening that we got here. But again, really 95% of the house, interior and exterior, I've never had this problem in 12 years.
Was your architect aware that the patio is expanded?
I can't speak for him. He was at the house. I'm not sure. I can't speak on his behalf for that.
I'm curious, did you have legal counsel at the prior hearing?
I don't recall if we had legal counsel at that hearing. The architect was there, and if I did it again, I would have had this legal counsel with me, or different legal counsel. Look, I understand a lot more now about the process going through this than I think I did at that at that time, 6 years ago.
Yeah, I'm still troubled with that, because it's hard, I mean, the issue of the setback was explicitly addressed in the resolution, explicitly addressed. I was on the board then, I was not at the hearing, I missed that meeting. But it was explicitly addressed in the resolution, I assume it was discussed at the hearing. I have a hard time accepting that could not have been understood clearly by everybody involved.
Let me offer some things that you should know. One is, I see a difference between the patio and the structure. The structure involves them going for a permit, and it didn't get caught, it should have been caught, the zoning plan and the building plan, and normally in Summit, I'm surprised it didn't get caught. So there is a thing that we can't rule on equitable estoppel, but a court can. So if you were to say to this gentleman, take that, change the house back to the plan that we approved, I think that they have an argument if they go to court on the issue regarding the house. With things like a patio, it's pretty easy to say, move the patio or go back to the original plan, or, I think the better and wiser way to handle a case like this is to evaluate it based on, would you have approved this if this was the case that was presented in 2016? And you, like any other, the conditions didn't change in one way. The house is located where it is. It's set back very far on the lot. Then you have a question of what's the negative impact on the surrounding neighbors. You have very strong, compelling testimony that they don't feel, and there's been, normally this board makes a awesome effort to make sure that there's landscaping. It sounds like it's already been implemented here. So I get your concern. If this was a pattern either for this applicant or for other people, I think we should really say no sometimes and take and give someone a bloody nose. I'm not sure if this is the person we do that on.
The answer to your question, he was represented by counsel, and that gentleman's name was Christopher Turan.
We can just have a couple of minutes to turn back the clock and pretend that we're asking for permission instead of forgiveness, and we can present some really good facts.
That's sometimes what we do here, is that would we have approved this if it had been presented in 2016? And adding a room that we didn't know about, I'm not sure I would have done, but we don't want to get into executive session before we get to executive
Not quite yet.
session.
Well, I was trying to give you guys an easy path, and try to avoid the pictures, but if you have concerns and doubts, we will start putting all the photos in the evidence.
I'm not sure if the board members here have quite gotten their pound of flesh. I don't know how this side of the dais feels.
I guess I'm concerned, but every time
You have questions, yeah. This is an executive session, but questions
Well, yeah,
that
because
would help
every
you
time,
clarify.
so you didn't go back to the building, the department to say, hey, I'm changing my plans or anything? That was not done?
For the, no, we didn't. Yeah.
If I may, I'm sorry, there are two pieces
Right.
of this change. Chuck, the first change was from were the first plans submitted to this board in 2016, the house that you wanted to build?
No, they were not.
And when were the plans for the house you wanted to build submitted to this board? Or not to this board, but submitted to the city of Sumner?
They were submitted later at the permitting process.
Okay, so the house that was submitted, the plans that were submitted for permitting were the house that you had intended to build?
Yes.
Okay. And did you understand from the city's approval of that permit plan that you had received approval from the governing body for that construction?
Yes.
So at that point, it wasn't a thought process to come back because you believed that you'd received approval when the city approved the permit plans for zoning?
That's to the building, that's to the building. So there's really two issues. When I went to the building department, there was a slight modification in the plans that the building department did not pick up on that's different from what was approved. So that got authorized, that was authorized before it was constructed. Improperly, but it was authorized. The patio is a field change that, it's when you make proofs before, you don't care. When we make proofs before a board, what you testified to, it's a case, this is a judicial body. So when you change the outcome, then that's not what we approved, and that's why you're back. And I think what I would, again, I'm back to what I just said, and I think I've been giving this advice for 30 years, is that when you're dealing with a case that's looking for relief, as a matter of the second time through, the question is, or if somebody does something without permission, the question is, would you have approved this project the way it's currently shown at the time?
Can I just get some clarification on something? The current setback, required setback for this lot is what?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about.
Discounting the 10-foot allowable, invasion of the setback. What is the total setback?
For the patio or the
For the
building?
patio, I'm just talking about the
Okay,
patio.
so the patio, with consideration for the 10-foot permitted encroachment, is required to be 35 feet back from the boundary. That's
And it
supposed
is
to be
actually
setback.
what?
And the existing patio that was intended to remain was 24 feet.
Wait,
And-
intended,
And I'm
24.
getting to the next step, which is the as-built, the way it ended up, is 13 feet at the nearest point.
Mr. Clark, where is the back of the original house located? What is the setback of the very original house built in the 20s? How much did they have to work with?
Well, the house, the original setback of the house was 44.4 feet in the back left corner.
So the original house is already in the setback.
We're
Yeah,
not talking about the
I'm
house.
talking,
The patio.
I'd like to just get more clarification on the patio.
Yeah, we're
How
talking about the
big is
patio,
the
right?
patio now as built? Like
Square
if
feet.
it's
The patio-
basically square-ish, what's the depth and the width?
Well, my number includes the walks and the patio, and it's 1677, 1,677.
What about dimensions for the patio?
Dimensions for the living area of the patio.
I guess what people are starting to consider is, what if we went back to that 13-foot line, how much patio would have to be removed?
No, that's
No?
not what I'm,
Okay.
I'd just like to get an idea of how big the patio is. Do they need that much patio? I don't want to beat anybody up or
Well, no one
have
really
them
needs a
shave
patio
like
in the
a
first
foot off
place.
because,
It's a fundamental luxury item in the first place, but.
yeah,
No,
but
what's the size?
So it could be
Yeah, I don't have the exact linear dimensions of it, so it's obviously, I didn't bring my scale with me. Does anyone have a scale?
Couple engineers or architects in the house. Anybody got a spare square scale? That's right.
I see the briefcase
Up, here we go. Your knight in shining armor. Here we go. Thank you. Oh, there we go. They're all coming out.
Thank you.
That was a good one.
Patio is about 66 feet wide, and it obviously varies in depth, about 20 feet on average depth.
and the width, I'm sorry,
It's about 65 feet wide,
65 by
Right.
20-ish?
yes.
Before coming to the board tonight, did you consider a reconfiguration of the patio?
Yes, however, and there are questions I really want to ask Mr. Salzman
Oh, of
about
course.
why this is a better patio overall, why this serves the community better, why this serves the neighbor better, why this.
Aside from the entertaining all the party that Mr. Merritt gets to enjoy, yes. But no, please, if you have questions.
And but your lot coverage is within guideline?
Lot coverage is fine,
Okay.
yes, lot coverage is permitted. Mr. Salzman, the side patio that you had, did that work for your family and for internal traffic within the house for dining outside once you finished the additions?
No, it did not.
And when you had the side patio, was that a fairly open and exposed part of your yard?
Yes, so the side patio was viewable from the street, from three sides, to another neighbor on the side and to the back where Ray is actually, so.
How
that-
many houses could you see while having dinner on your old patio?
About 5.
And how many
5.
How many houses can you see from your existing patio?
2.
And how many sort of windows can you see, from your existing patio?
Yeah, I really can't see any windows. This is, if they're all the way back at the fence, they could see me, but standing on the patio, I cannot see. There's enough coverage. I don't know if we're going to get to the pictures or not, but yeah, there's enough coverage where I don't see any of the houses, actually.
Okay, so you can see structures, but there are no windows.
Correct.
It's a private area essentially.
Yes.
And the patio is on green, correct? It's flat on the lawn.
Yes, it is.
And is it on the same level as any of your neighbors?
No, we're significantly below the neighbors. So there's a retaining wall that on average is probably about 8 feet. And then on top of that, there's a fence with ivy growing on it that's about another 4 feet. And there's trees on the retaining wall that, go up 20, 30 feet or so. So it's totally private.
So when you and your family and your friends are entertaining or having dinner on the old patio, were you audible to the neighborhood?
Yes.
Are you now in your new patio audible to the neighborhood?
No, not at all.
Thank you. Are there any questions about why this is?
Additional questions, please?
Is your patio set in concrete? Is it a bluestone? Is it set in a dry granite, crushed granite?
Yeah, it's set in dry, yes.
Dry
Yep.
set, okay.
We thought of these three-piece things.
Just slice them.
This is the patio. It's, attractive and slate, and the slight difference in impermeable coverage has Mr. Clark will attest.
Yeah,
to
it's
that.
within the limit, and
No stormwater issues, Mr. Clark?
I have not identified any stormwater issues numerous times on site.
I'm sorry. Has there been any flood, during Ida, did you have any issues with stormwater?
No, there's been none. None at all.
Have your... The patio was when you completed.
You realize that having these three things next to each other actually makes it look larger, right?
And I have a question. I want to make sure I get this marked. I didn't hear anybody.
I didn't mark it on purpose, Tom, because if we don't go to a lawsuit, I was trying to spare the secretary from housing.
Because I want to ask a question about, that stone wall. Is that stone wall, is that on the property line?
No.
Okay.
The stone wall that you see on the as-built, you can see is.
Oh, I see it there.
Is right here. So it runs in front of the older concrete wall that's in the back. So this is elevated with the wall as you see, and then all the plantings are in that area.
Okay.
Can't make this stuff up. kids.
Sorry, one sec, Mr. Steiner. Wally, did you have a question? Sorry, a little while ago. Before we
No,
get to
you
this
said you didn't
panorama.
have any issues during Ida. Did your neighbors have any issues that you know of, either your back neighbors or your
Either
front
side.
door neighbors that may have been caused as a result of having this oversized patio?
No, and again, the neighbors behind us are.
Above you,
8
but
feet
anyone
above,
below you?
and We're set back significantly from the front, Essex Road, so none at all.
Can I try something? Can somebody on one of these drawings show me where that patio would end today? So that if we were considering this as a variance today to add this amount to it,
Right.
can you tell me where that would be and what that would look like and how much we're adding?
I can show you because it's on the as-built deliberately. So that the dashed line that runs around here, that was the existing original patio limit. So the original patio ended right about there, between the words patio and fire. And so the additional patio is this area.
So if we were considering this as a variance application today,
So
we
what-
would be adding from that line back towards the end of the
Correct.
thing. And if we turned it down, that a portion of the patio would need to be removed.
Can you see this, Wally, or anybody?
That's right.
Have I got it?
And the fundamental argument I would make in terms of the function of the patio, as was already described, the functional pre-existing patio was this portion on the left side of the house. Because this part of it is only 9 or 10 feet deep from the dwelling. So as a practical matter, most patios want to be at least 14 to 16 feet deep to be able to put a little bit of furniture on
Yes,
it.
you're making the argument for the variance today, I get it.
And enjoy it. So diverting the use that's over here, which was incongruent with the house use itself, you're coming out like a living room here to the patio, and rerouting that to a more useful layout in the back is what the gist of this is. The other thing I would point out is that ordinarily we're sitting here discussing this and you're thinking about it and we're hypothesizing and guessing essentially on what the impacts might be to neighbors. I would argue that we've had 5 or 6 years of the patio actually being there, that if the neighbors were outraged or felt upset or thought it was going to impact them in a negative way, they would have been here with the notification, or we would have had the police called previously.
I like that rationale, Mr. Clark. We are very fortunate to have 5 years
Yeah, I
of
mean,
non-conforming.
it's a rare event where you can
I
actually
understand,
have a live test as to what.
So we, in essence,
No one should do that though, right? No
Right,
one should
that's-
build something and then
that's
go
not
back.
recommended.
No, of course not.
All right.
It's not the way
So-
I'm arguing for that.
All right, time out. We're kind of all over the place. Thank you for doing your best to focus. No, it's not your fault, don't worry. You have other opportunities later in the agenda. So, Ms. Britt, if you can help refocus your application, your line of questioning, so we can bring this to a conclusion at some point. Thank you.
I will try not to use any more photographs. Mr. Clark, is it possible to build any patio without extending into the necessary setback in this zone regarding this property?
No.
Thank you. So the question would be, how much of the setback is going to be infringed upon in order to have a livable patio for a house of this character and size in a neighborhood of this character and size? Would
That's
that be
correct,
accurate?
yes.
Okay.
When did the applicant acquire the property?
In 2010.
And did you use the patio frequently up until construction?
Not as much as I use it now.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, the patio that existed previously, when your construction was complete, had you lost some of that patio to the construction?
Yes, yes, because the way the house is now, the use of the house and the way the kitchen is and everything, and there was a mudroom put on, so we did lose some of it, yes.
And with the loss of that share of the patio, was the patio workable, usable for outdoor dining or entertaining at that time?
No, it wasn't. Not to where it is now, no.
What did you use the rear patio for previously?
It was really, we didn't, just sitting. I mean, there was a small grill I had out there. It wasn't used as often as we're able to use it now.
And was that before the construction or during the construction?
That was before the construction.
And after the construction, was there any real functional use to the patio?
Not the way it was, no.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan, if you had this to do all over again, would you do it differently?
I would absolutely do this differently, and this is not how I would intend to do this. I apologize to the board for doing it this way. I would have done it much differently with legal counsel and done it with the proper variances. Again, I know I've said this, but I've lived in the house for 13 years, done a number of projects, really renovated 95% of the interior and exterior landscape, and I've never had a problem or really what I see is done anything that wasn't the right way of doing things.
Why did you file plans in 2016 when you got the variance, or 2015 when they're dated, without the expanded patio?
I didn't realize at the time I needed the variance for so when I did that, I met with the architect and, went through the process. He said, we need a variance for that addition we were putting on. And really my focus at the time was on that addition, not on the patio piece of that. And the patio became a site change when we were, doing construction, conversation with the landscaper, and it went from there.
Was this permit closed out?
Yes, my understanding is that it was closed out, yes.
When?
I don't recall the exact date, but my understanding was everything was closed out. I guess we could-
After the construction in 2016 or 17,
Yes,
in that timeframe?
yes.
How did we get here in 2022?
Yeah. Why are we-
So we had, we put in I believe it was because we put in a second air conditioning unit, another zone into the house, and they came to close out the permit on an air conditioning unit and saw that some plans did not match up at that point.
So does
If
that,
I'm following the timeline
Okay.
correctly, I think
So-
that's how this happened.
so does that mean then that the patio was added after the construction permit was closed out?
No, this was all going on at the same time as construction.
And sort of hearkening back to an earlier question, typically the architect visits the property periodically during construction. That's part of the drill. And did your architect do that?
Yes, he did.
So I don't mean to harp on this, but I think there's a contradiction, if I understood what was just stated, between what you testified and what's in Ms. Long's summary here. Ms. Long's summary says on page 2, when the applicants sought to close out their building permits from the 2016 improvements, it was discovered by the zoning officer that the applicant's rear patio had been expanded. So was it from the 2016 improvements, or was it from
I may have been in error there, and I apologize if the error was ours. As we've gone through the timeline of what has proven to be a much more complicated process than we initially understood, I think my effort to make this make sense to myself resulted in a misstatement rather than any fault of Mr. Salzman's. I also wondered, who's visiting the property in 2022 in regards to a 2016 construction event?
And I was
So-
very confused when I read this, and I
Yeah.
said, that didn't make sense. So the applicant's testimony is now that it was for a recent air conditioning condenser?
I believe that's, and again, I'd have to go back and understand it all myself, but yes, I believe that's where it all came from, yes.
And Mr. Salzman raised this with our office. We had an internal discussion, and this is our error rather than his.
All right, so I have a different question. Maybe this is for the board attorney. Do we have a different way to rationalize this outside of what we would normally be doing, like a C variance or a D variance? Because it's a different issue, right? It's more of a technicality. It went before the board. You guys got the proper planning variances, and the city went out there. They didn't catch the mistake either. That's been closed on. This is essentially moot because it goes down to your air conditioning having to get closed out on. That's the only issue. And now we're retroactively having, but that's not the application.
Here's-
That is the application, but.
Let me, I'm going to try to, I
the
mentioned it, but
analysis different?
I'm gonna do it again. Which is, there's this theory, and it's called equitable estoppel. And applicants don't get to use it very often, but it does happen more than I'd like to admit, that the building department will issue a permit that was reasonable for the applicant to rely on, and then they build something. And then under the doctrine of equitable estoppel, they're allowed to keep it even if it doesn't meet the zoning ordinance, all right? You can't have the police department issue it, because that would be totally beyond their control. But you assume when the building department looks at something, they've checked it, and it's compliant. So the question is the reliance reasonable? Now, here's the catch. Zoning board can't make a ruling on equitable estoppel. Only the court can make that ruling. But what happens is, if we deny this case for some reason,
We should
and it
make a
goes
case
to-
for equitable
it-
estoppel
it
at this
will-
point,
no,
right? It
it
would
will
be
go to court.
reasonably
They
reliant on
will
this
make the
planning.
argument, they will
Yes.
make the argument for equitable estoppel when it goes to court.
Which would be a good argument because that was fairly reliant on the planning permits that went
Right, it's
through
not
and
like they
haven't gotten
cheated
built, and yes.
There's two issues in this case. One is the building, which they had a permission to do, and the other is the patio,
Patio.
which they didn't have permission to do. And the question is, And I'm saying, putting aside the right and the wrong of it, would you have approved it? Or do you think, maybe you think the patio needs to be reduced somewhat, but I can hear arguments, I see all the arguments on both sides. So what I would say is, the normal bulk variance requirement would be, this is a unique condition with the house being so far back. It's not unusual to expect living space in the rear of the home. So they have potentially a hardship. I think that's what you probably found in 2016. I bet you I wrote that. And then the question is, you have to weigh the balance against the negative impact on the neighbors. And you had very strong testimony from Mr. Merritt about the fact that it's been there and doesn't seem to be a bad idea.
I totally understand everything you just said. My
Good, I
question.
wish you could talk to my wife.
Yeah. My question is just a clarification. The enclosed porch, was that approved in that original
Yes,
permit?
yes.
Okay,
And it shouldn't have been.
okay.
No, we said that that was supposed to be an open porch. And when they submitted the plans to the building department, it showed it being closed, right?
Do we
It
have,
wasn't a field change.
I'm not sure if the building plan showed it open and still or closed in just a different shape and setback.
That would be a huge
it's a big
difference.
change.
It's
It's a big change, and and I know you've submitted what you believe was submitted to the city. Does the city have a copy to present to this board of what was actually presented to them? Do we have in our files what was approved by the building department for this construction? You're giving us what you think was submitted, and you're not the architect. Mr. Potter is not here. I don't understand why he's not here. But I would love to see the approved plans as approved by the city of Summit that says, yes, this is what you can do, because we have not seen that.
But is
And
it
should.
actually even relevant? I mean,
It is.
It's very
For the
what's
equitable
relevant is
estoppel.
what they got a permit for, not what was submitted.
And it was closed out.
And it was closed out.
No,
But
no,
only that aspect that
If
reflects
it's
the as-built.
if it's closed
that
out under
reflects the
false
plan submitted.
pretenses, it isn't closed in my book.
Whatever the city approved is what they approved, but some things went beyond that, and I think that's what's
Right.
really
And I want to know
causing the
what was
controversy.
submitted.
And that's, I mean, I've heard what you said, Dennis, and I believe what I hope what you're saying is that the equitable estoppel runs to what the city permitted.
yeah.
And if there were changes beyond what the city permitted, equitable estoppel won't apply.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, so the
completely.
patio, there's no
so
equitable estoppel for the
The
patio.
representation, I'm
Okay.
working off the facts that I heard tonight. The representation I heard was that the building plans submitted were different than the zoning plan and were authorized by the building department. Now, we need facts to support that.
Mr. Galvin, I believe that the rules of court also apply here in terms of total candor with the board. And it is our belief, based upon the plans that we received from Mr. Potter, that the plans submitted to the city of Summit, again, I don't have any specific correspondence with the city of Summit to demonstrate that this is in fact the case, but it is our understanding that the plans submitted to the city of Summit included open second-story porch and walkway, and did not include a patio, but did include the squared-off porch and the gable roof on the squared-off two-story porch, and the gable roof.
So enclosed, the
one-story
patio was,
porch.
the plan of
The walls were not present. It was not enclosed. It was open on the second story. For the permit plans, they were
So
open.
what Krista has indicated is that the enclosure of the second level of that part of the addition is different. It was not what was approved.
all right, so that changes the facts.
The footprint and location of it was in the permit submission, but the enclosure of the second story was not, in my understanding.
I apologize. My understanding of
You're
the facts
forgiven.
is, I thought I heard that you got a permit to enclose it.
We got a permit to change the shape and to change the footprint.
Well, you
Right.
shouldn't have been allowed to change the shape either without coming back.
And
to us.
that's
Well,
why I
but
think we
that's
need to
water under the
examine the
bridge.
city's documents in addition to theirs.
Nor did
And
the
defer
applicant.
this until,
Well, we can,
Well,
or proceed with considering the application as is presented this evening, as if it was essentially a new submission. Trying our best to put behind us all the ups and downs, the drama behind it all.
I agree with that.
Consider the enclosure, consider the expanded patio, testimony of the neighbor, et cetera. And what I haven't heard from the board in their deliberation, and it's an interesting soap opera for sure, we're certainly eating up the full hour, is the conditions or any requests for a change. I offered, any question about is there an alternative patio configuration or size. And it's the testimony of the applicant and their attorney that as it is presented now, it maximizes usability, it minimizes impact on neighbors to a given location, doesn't impact stormwater management. So I'm we're not in an executive session, but I'm open to questions about how to potentially modify the patio.
Are
or
we
the
in
other elements.
executive session?
We're not in executive session.
Because I have some thoughts on that when we get to it, but how we can modify it.
Because I do also, I don't believe anyone else here, aside from Mr. Merritt, is from the general public. We also invite questions from the public for any of the witnesses as well, just a matter of procedure. But are there any questions of the board members for either Mr. Clark or Mr. Salzman or Ms. Long about potential modifications to the application, conditions that often allow us to bring applications that we often find unpalatable into a more palatable form?
Well, all right, speaking for myself, I would be more comfortable with this if the patio was cut back to be closer to what was approved in 2016.
Are we in executive session?
We're not, but we're trying to
We're
throw
trying
out.
to maneuver.
We're trying to maneuver, yeah.
So when the plans went in, it called for an open second floor room that didn't have walls.
Yes.
What was the use for that?
The use for that was what originally drawn as an open porch or a potential future study,
Okay.
which is what it ended up becoming when we closed the walls in.
So just, I heard you
So-
say potential future study.
So on
before
the
you put
variance,
walls
and
in,
and
but-
I don't, this is how the architect wrote it, was open porch, potential, I believe it said, I don't have it in front of me right now, study, and that was my understanding as to why. And it was a field change, we could then close it in, that was the discussion with the architect.
Do you remember, I mean, this is 6 years ago, but do you remember if it was an issue at the time to put walls up on the non-walled room?
Is it conforming to building coverage?
Defer. My understanding at the time was that it was okay to do, as
So
through
at the time,
discussions
it
with my
would not have been
architect.
an issue, it shouldn't be an issue now,
Right.
and it's more usable having been closed in and.
Yes, it's more usable, certainly for myself and the family, and as far as, an issue for the neighbors, it's actually more private, so there's less light, it's quieter, and
So it's like a
Kind of-
huge benefit to have this as an addition to your house as opposed to like a detriment. It adds to your property usage and.
yes,
Good, yeah.
absolutely, yes.
Fantastic.
So maybe to give the board a pause, I don't believe Mr. Burns, you've looked at this application. Are you here, you're here really for the third
I typically
application?
don't review the single-family
Right,
applications.
yeah, that's fair. Now, if there's anything you want to add to the conversation or consideration?
I've been thinking about it. I guess just some of the thoughts that I have are that, I think it is obvious that the house is set back to some extent. And in cases like this, I think it's reasonable to consider both the impacts and the extent to which, this type of work would trigger other variance relief, namely the coverage issue. So, I understand the board's concerns. I think there's some comfort with the screening that's been provided. It's unfortunate that we got to where we are, as tends to happen. So, it's up to the board if they want more information or if they have enough to, affirmatively
Sure.
decide.
I see Mr. Dower is grinning that he's sitting behind you tonight. So, is there anything you'd like to add to help the board consider any potential unforeseen impact or anything else that we might want to weigh in our decision here on the application as it's presented this evening?
No problem. Yes, the stormwater management in general, the previous contour plan from 2016 shows that you have, the grading goes to the south side of the property, basically. So we're just wanting to make sure that you don't have any impacts on the neighbors in that location.
Yeah, so the grading comes here and then down the hill, the way that combined with the actual topography and the landscaping that's not really shown on this side, the water comes down the hill and then settles in the front yard of this property fundamentally, primarily. So I don't, there haven't been in the last 5 years, and I wouldn't foresee any sort of negative impact to the neighbors. Any water impacts are strictly on this property itself, and there's a rather flat, expansive front yard before you even get to the right of way.
Okay,
So I don't
thank
see that problem.
Anything else?
Thank you.
And then maybe just to both of you, a thought that has just occurred to me was that perhaps by enclosing this space, its active use would be less visible and impactful to surrounding properties. Would either our planner or engineer care to opine on
Yeah,
that
I'll
possibility?
give you the line from the resolution. We had, over this addition will be an open covered balcony and open porch area. So I don't know why I would write that unless there was some concern about it being open.
You characterize an open porch to likely have a potential greater impact on the surrounding
On the
properties
second
than an
floor.
enclosed, on a second floor, an
Noise,
enclosed property.
Certainly, the activities would be more readily observable by the residential properties around it. Caveat to that would be that you probably get more use out of a fully enclosed room. You know, it'd be more of a year-round versus a seasonal thing, depending on the situation. But again, it goes back to impacts, and I think you consider the topography, the screening, if any further improvements are needed. And I don't know if we have enough information. I don't know if there are any images of that.
Well, they have lots
got lots
over
of
here.
images.
I mean,
Got
on
it.
that
Show
room,
it. Got an art
if
gallery.
we're talking about the room, to understand what that portion of the house looks like.
They showed us that.
Okay. I didn't get a great view of it.
Thank you. In 2016, your historical preservation officer made a comment in his comments to that application, which I believe is in our application, and therefore you already have it, and we don't need to mark it. But he noted that he was against the open porch because he felt that owners of the property, it caused owners of the property to linger outside on the balcony within the setback, and this is the reason that accessory uses like patios and balconies are prohibited, because the setback exists to provide the proper distance and privacy to neighbors. So he actually was suggesting that closing it in was a good idea. If you're gonna have that structure there, the walls created more privacy rather than less.
Okay.
Interestingly, also, this letter talks about the chamfered shape being not at all what is consistent with the City of Summit's architecture in this area and the house's architecture in this area. So we were not able to find out whether the change was in part inspired by the city's comments and that they did in fact occur very quickly after this letter was written.
Do you know if that's still true? Do you know if any other changes have happened to surrounding homes that maybe now it is in line with the aesthetics of the home as opposed to dated historic preservation comments?
Well, I think the sort of cupola shape was not in keeping with the colonial cottage aesthetic of the house. And I think the houses that surround this house are of similar architectural style, so to introduce a Victorian feature would have been dissonant, and that was what the officer felt.
Is there any other testimony you or any of your witnesses like to provide?
I really just want to, emphasize with this final question to Mr. Salzman, did you ever intend to deceive any of these people or this board or anyone else with this series of misunderstandings with Mr. Potter and the equitable estoppel issue that has come up? Did you ever intend to deceive anyone?
No, not in any way.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Salzman. We've done a pretty thorough interrogation here this evening. I feel like your penance for this should be to join the zoning board at some point, but that's not my decision. Are there any other more technical questions about the actual application, the consideration of the expanded patio, the enclosed porch, the specific variances under request this evening? No? Okay. I would invite any members of the interested public that have questions of the witnesses or potentially a statement you'd like to make. You've already spoken, Mr. Merritt, so thank you very much. Anyone else from this one? No?
May I ask just one final question?
Sure,
I apologize.
yep.
Mr. Salzman, did you ask Mr. Potter to be here this evening?
I did, yes.
Is he here?
No.
Did he explain why he would not be here?
Not in great detail, no.
Thank you.
The
That's
o-
all I have.
Thank you. The only condition that I've heard, or that we typically would impose upon an application is acceptance of the engineer's letter, which is a kind of capture of the standard review. Is there any objection to that condition being added to this application?
No.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't hear any other more specific requests for conditions or anything identified from our professionals. So with that, hearing no further testimony or testimony from the public or questions from the public, thank you, Mr. Salzman. You can grab a seat if you'd like. Mr. Clark, good to see you. Ms. Sloan, we can enter into executive session. Who hasn't spoken? Mr. Millay? No? Liz, start us off here. What's on your mind?
Oh, this was tough. When I went to visit the house, I'm like, wow, that's a big patio. Like a lamp at the house. And it's a lot larger than what was approved. And, you know, doing construction on my own house, like I know the building department comes pretty much every step of the way. So I'm torn of how they missed 11 feet. So I just have to go thinking.
I'm going to give it to Mr. Yuko
Yeah.
next. He often has a firm perspective after years of distinguished service here on the zoning board.
Yeah, I'm going to try. I mean, obviously, this is a very difficult application. There's some unfortunate things here, and I'm still not quite sure of all the history. But, I mean, there are two concerns I have, one of which I'm okay with and one of which I'm not. I was concerned about the enclosure of that second floor area, which was not approved before, but I accept that that's probably a better solution than having that open area. But that patio, that setback, that 11 feet, you know, I'm trying to put myself 6 years ago, would I have approved that, since I'm trying to, you know, that's what the approach I'm trying to take. And I honestly think I wouldn't, just because, you know, I get that the neighbor now is okay with it. Neighbors change, vegetation changes, things can change over the years. And that's a very big variance for an outdoor activity to be so close to other backyards. So I almost wish I could vote on that separately from the other issues. But if we're going to vote on it all together, I think I would have to vote against it because of the setback issue with the patio.
Mr. Mullen, what did Mr. Yuko miss?
No, I'm having the same struggle, quite honestly. It's like, yeah, we have the benefit of hindsight to know it hasn't had an adverse impact on the neighbors. The whole situation with building off the plans by a material amount is troubling. It's a policy issue for me. You know, we see a lot of applications where we're more trying to grant forgiveness than permission, and we have to take each one separately. But as a policy matter, you know, you grant these variances repeatedly. Public takes a message from that, and I think we've all seen it. And I'm not saying advantage was taken here, but we also have to consider the broad impacts of our decisions. But taking this case on its own, putting myself in the position of, all right, rewinding to 2016, you know, you look at those, well, those pictures don't exist. You visualize the setbacks and, you know, going to the rear property line, going to the start of the concrete wall, and we probably would not have approved something that big. Would we have approved something bigger than what existed? There's a likelihood. I don't know if we're going all the way there, and that's kind of the struggle, because then if we deny it, we're effectively either ordering demolition or initiating litigation with the applicant. And there are no real good alternatives here, so I'm struggling with this.
Let's hear from the side. All right, Diana, what do you got for us?
This homeowner has obviously made some significant financial investment in this renovation, in the patio, especially in, strike that, not the patio, I don't care about that, but a lot of investment in the screening, the landscaping. He's worked cooperatively with a neighbor. to bring this patio into conformance would make a 65-foot wide patio by 9 feet, if I, in round numbers, which is not a very usable space. I think that if we were talking about a real-time application, we might be encouraging that homeowner to, yes, go into your setback. Maybe 20 feet is good, but it shouldn't be 65 feet wide. Maybe it should be a little bit less. But having said this, there is a significant site, situation here, and I would call it a hardship to have the house set so far back. And a house of this size needs to have some outdoor recreation area in the form of a patio. I'm not voting, but I would support it.
Seven vote, wait, four votes, seven to vote?
Seven.
Four affirmative. All right, be
Seven
careful.
has to get the vote.
But Claire, go ahead, weigh in.
At some point, the homeowner is responsible for the construction on his property. Whether or not he's an expert on it, the buck has to stop someplace. And I think that if this were before us de novo, we would be negotiating the size of that patio, that it would not be approved in the size that it's before us. I get the city doesn't have clean hands on the building itself, and I'm not going there. But somebody's responsible for this.
Mr. Steiner, who's responsible for this?
Me. No. I don't know we have a lot of people that have to share responsibility on this one. The absence of the architect is troubling. The situation that we're faced with, I guess, is exactly what, and I don't really want to be in the position of putting this thing into the courts, because if we do that, all we're doing is costing the city money, costing the applicant money, and not solving the problem. So if we look at this as two separate variance applications today, one to allow the walls to come down on the porch, on the second floor, I don't have a problem with that, and I would vote for that and have no problem. As far as the patio is concerned, we have a trade-off here that has already been made. The side patio is gone. Significant amount of ground cover has been taken away, so if we were doing negotiations, that might have been one of the things we might have negotiated out, because that patio would have been there. Now, whether or not we would have gone that far back towards the if they were willing to come in a few feet here or there, and again, that's something you could, they can talk among themselves while I'm talking, to figure out whether or not a few feet can come off that particular edge of the patio and be replaced perhaps with some nice vegetation or nice grass or something like that. I don't know how many feet everybody would be comfortable with, but that might be a compromise that we could all live with in a way to get this thing off the table.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the trade-off of the side patio would have been that valuable, because it's not as close to the property line. I get what you're thinking.
But we would have,
Yeah.
we would have done, it would have been on the table. We would have said that, and they would have granted it almost immediately.
I think that's a good idea, Joe, and reconfiguring the rear patio to some extent, I think would be what we would have done. And I think,
I like the smile I'm seeing, so.
and I just think about like the public policy argument I was talking about before. I think it does say that applicants need to comply with plans.
Yes.
And they can be revisited if compliance isn't there.
What would the board suggest?
What would you suggest?
Who's going to go first?
We're not trading against ourselves, kids. I didn't just fall off the pumpkin truck,
I guess that's the question, is what would you suggest? I do want to you know, we did remove and thank you for bringing it up, we did remove the entire side
Listen, I think.
patio, which,
I think I think we're trying to figure out the metric.
yeah, I
I think
understand.
you got some support for
Yeah.
having 20 feet wide, and now we want you to remove, you got a 60 feet long. Like, can you take 50 feet off? No, I mean, can you want
Square
me to
feet, can you give us some
negotiate,
square feet?
you know?
I'm spitballing here, and I'm out of line, please say so. One thought that I just had as I'm listening to the discussion is whether or not, if we brought this whole edge in 2 feet and made it a 15-foot setback, to me, that's not unreasonable in the sense that you can put a pool or a cabana or a garage or other structures that are within 15 feet of the line if it's in the rear yard. If you were going to get a pool permit, you could put it 15 feet away. So to be 15 feet is better than the 13 that we have and a reduction.
So you'll remove 2 feet per 65-foot length, is that what the?
Well, that's I guess, the question is, you know, does it go across the 65 or does it go to a certain point that's near the outdoor
About getting rid
bar
of
that's
this.
there?
Is that gonna hit the fire pit if you went 2 feet all the way?
I think if you went all the way down there, it probably would clip down to that, yeah.
Was it
Maybe like 2
by
feet up to the fire
50
pit?
feet or
I
something?
mean, I'm not a patio,
Right.
you know, creative patio designer myself, but,
I do like the analogy to the pool setback. I like that.
because I've done a few pool everybody's putting a pool in, I've done a few recently, and that's the setback for the pool.
Sloan, what do you think? What's your offer?
This may be a little unconventional, and we're very grateful that you're considering this at all. With the play set going away, Ganisini patio, is that on the table?
We're throwing the kids under the bus?
Look, it's the kids or my wife's gonna leave me after this, so.
Where is the play set?
The play set is here, and the play set takes up, a fair amount of space.
We don't care about that, relax.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the coverage isn't
the
the
kids
issue,
play.
it's the setback.
Yeah.
Well, the kids do play on the patio. They ride their bikes here.
But it doesn't give you back coverage, it's not encroaching on neighboring property.
And so the question that we have remaining is, if we went to 15 feet, would it mess up the fire pit, or could you move the fire pit? Or
If it's
like-
65 feet, could you do 50 feet of width
all the way
and
down.
2 feet of depth? Give us an even 100 square feet?
Round off the fire pit.
You know,
Or submit a revised, the motion would be subject to us approving the revised plan that we trust you to draw. To give us, what's 15 feet
Present
times?
a
15
patio modification plan.
15 feet times 60 is
900.
900, so get rid of show me, try to meet 15, if you have to jug it somewhere around.
Let's go for that.
Is there anything else I can, is there anything else I can get rid of? Seriously, to negotiate?
I think the board wants to get rid of me, so.
I understand, I mean, taking 2 feet off, I understand it, it removes it 2 feet, it's a significant a job bringing, redoing the entire thing. I'm just wondering if we could find another solution in the back for something else. I thought the play set would be,
I feel bad saying this, but it goes back to the plans that were submitted that didn't get followed. So I know we're like talking about coverage and we're talking about setbacks, but at the same time, to your policy issue, we should not be letting this, and normally I'm not voting, so I can say this. I would feel bad and I would see the detriment to you, and right, it would be terrible to have you knock this down, and that's how I would normally vote, but I'm not voting, so I can say this. It's a policy thing. I would not be okay saying, yeah, you should go ahead and build stuff, and then we're gonna retroactively see what we can take out later if it gets caught on a technicality. I would say cut the patio out.
Well, we gotta.
You want to cut out your AC?
Cut the AC.
Kidding.
No, for me, it's a setback, so I like Mr. Clark's analogy of the pool to bring it back 2 feet to be a 15-foot. How far across that 2 foot should go, I'm open on that. Speaking for myself.
And I'm supportive of doing something here that's not fully getting rid of the entire excess patio, because having been on this board for a little bit of time now, I kind of know how these cases have generally gone, and we would have wound up somewhere between 24 feet and where it currently sits as constructed.
Would we maybe have said
take a-
get rid of the side patio, and would that
Can we
have
take
been?
a vote?
I know, that's why
on-
I'm bringing,
Factoring that.
okay,
Can we take a
There is
vote,
a sensitivity
vote
to those
based
setbacks,
There
on
was-
that would have been taken into consideration.
plans to be submitted and approved
Well,
we need a number.
without carrying
We just want
it?
to make sure that we have a focus on what it is that we want.
Right.
Still struggling with the fact, we want some of this, we want part of this patio removed, okay? There is no verdict of this, right, version of this,
Right.
where it stays to where it is without the pain of removing some of that
The
patio.
question is, what's the square footage? The configuration, I think we're amenable to.
well, this,
being a revised.
I'm going through pain.
No,
I understand.
I get it, and I've
I-
been helping you the entire
Yeah.
time, right?
Yes, no, I totally
Okay?
appreciate that,
This might have been a crash and burn, maybe if I weren't here.
yeah.
Okay, so what I think you should do, I'm sorry,
No,
what the
it's
heck, I'm having fun. When you get old, you can have fun. So I think the easiest thing is to remove the 2 feet along the whole length. What's the problem? Unless the board wants you to reduce to 60.
Yeah, I don't want the whole length.
I,
because
that doesn't make sense. And-
Well, no,
and
what made sense
To take a
to
perfectly
Tom-
useful patio and render it
we're beyond that.
less than
No, we're beyond
ideal
that.
is
We're taking a
unfair.
perfectly useful patio and we're gonna reduce it somehow. We're gonna reduce it either on one side 2 feet or on the width, because you suggested it's big. Maybe we should be taking 10 or 20 feet off the end of this loaf of bread. But either way, something's gotta come off to make the policy point that if you don't follow, if you don't get permission, and it's only, you know, very expensive, I know, but it's only patio, it's not house structure, you know, and I think that's where the board's heading. You guys have to form a consensus.
Right.
So,
So I think, well, I heard from Mr. Yuko and Mr. Mullen that we don't love the encroachment as it is currently. 15 feet is a little more amenable. The question is, what is the width that will not impinge upon the usefulness?
You could probably avoid stipulating a width or getting overly involved in that by saying we don't want the patio any closer than 15 feet.
But does that cause a problem with the fire
And
pit?
then let us look at that.
We're trying to be amenable to the fire pit that looks like it,
Right, that's.
would
more
cause
than-
a usability
That's
issue.
20 feet
Okay.
plus at that end.
So
It's
we're
20
okay
feet
with
at that end.
so no, well, we
So
want to set
maybe
the
s-
encroachment at 15 feet. And
Right.
you
On the-
resolve the configuration
And-
to.
and stip-
theory,
and
that's the same setback that would be there if it were a pool.
Right.
So we got logic.
So what does that condition sound like, Mr. Galvin? Give us
We're
some
supposed, on a submission of a plan that shows the patio not to exceed a 15-foot setback along the rear yard property line.
All right, Mr. Clark, you want to take a moment to study the plan just to make sure there's not
Yeah,
going to be issue a third variance request?
I'm not at all sure that the applicant is anywhere near convinced that that's what he wants to do. And
Ultimately,
I
it'll be
would-
his
doesn't
I
have-
would- I would
it's our
give,
say.
I would give him
Well-
a moment or two to consult with his attorney, because it doesn't help us to pass a resolution that isn't going to fly.
Well,
I disagree with that. I mean,
We can,
we can pass the variance.
Yes, I know we
This is
can.
in fact quite palatable. We
Be
would
acceptable?
like to do that at
Okay.
this point, that we appreciate the offer, and we would very much like to make that drawing and agree to that condition.
Okay.
And I believe if we can, excuse me, Mr. Clark, if we can confirm that this setback is 13 feet
That's
now
right.
to this corner,
That's right.
and
I
this
think we
setback is 20 feet,
That's correct.
so what Mr. Salzman will be giving up is a portion of one side of the patio.
Right.
In a triangle shape, a long triangle.
right, what he'll be getting is a 15-foot setback from the rear
Right.
property line.
In
Yeah.
whatever
The
shape or
graciousness of
form
the
that
board.
takes.
Which is in fact.
Thank you, thank you.
A very nice thing.
Right.
Yes, which is in fact something
So
we're very.
so it really could be done by taking off a triangular sliver. is what
For
we're
example,
saying.
Yeah, I think an aesthetic choice is made, whether it's a triangle or, or a straight section.
Bend or something.
Or curves at the end or
Okay.
whatever. is-
Wonderful. Thank you for your flexibility, Mr. Salzman.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. With that additional condition, it's just past 9 o'clock, so we're doing okay. Let's, does anyone offer a motion with the conditions as noted to approve this application?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Stephanie, you give us a roll call?
Sure.
Thanks.
Chairman Spur,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Steiner,
Yes.
Ms. Newell,
Yes.
Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
Ms. Toth.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Let's take a 5-minute recess for the sake of the applicants to follow, just to take a deep breath and reset. And we'll be back to being at 9:10, our second application for the evening. Get these things out of here.
Yeah, you're gonna get this done in a half hour. No.